all, welcome to Narayana IAS Academy. This is Sureka Bhaskar presenting to you the daily news analysis. So for today's discussion, we've picked up a number of articles from The Hindu and the Indian Express which are both important and relevant for the UPSC CSE examination. Now, let us have a look at the topics one by one. The first article for the day has been picked up from page number 12 of the Indian Express. Journey to 2047. So in this particular article, we'll be discussing about what are the strides and the aspirations that India actually has in order to achieve the developed country status. At the same time, it is important to note what are the challenges as well as the opportunities for India. So here we'll be discussing about what it is to become a developed country, what is the current status of India, what are the areas of improvement that India has actually made, what are the challenges that India faces, as well as what are the strategies that India must actually adopt in order to move forward. The second article has been picked up from page number 12 of the Indian Express, Crime, Punishment and the Child. So in this particular article, we'll be discussing about the systemic failures and the inadequacies in the India's criminal justice system in order or when it actually deals with the juveniles, that is children who are in conflict with that of the law. So this has actually come up with respect to that of the recent Porsche car accident. The third article for the day has been picked up from page number 6 of The Hindu. Heat-baked Chennai can set an example for India. In this particular article, we'll be discussing about the phenomenon of urban heat islands and what are the impact that these urban heat islands actually have on the climate of the urban areas. The fourth article has been picked up from page number 14 of the Indian Express. US-China Defense Chief lock horns on Taiwan at Asia's Security Summit. In this particular article, we'll be discussing about Singapore recently hosting the Shangri-La Dialogue. Here we'll be understanding what this Shangri-La Dialogue is all about, the key facts as well as the significance. The last article for the day has been picked up from page number 10 of The Hindu. Railways to construct canopy bridges across tracks in Assam Gibbon habitat. So in this particular article, we'll be looking into how the Indian Railways have actually come up with the idea of constructing the canopy bridges across tracks in the Gibbon Wildlife Sanctuary, which is located in the Jorhat district of Assam for the free and the safer movement of the species. So for the prelims fact, we'll be discussing about the species of Hulok gibbons. And we will end the discussion by discussing few prelims as well as the mains practice questions. Now let us get on to the discussion. The first article for the day is Journey to 2047. So all of us know that India is actually making fast strides, or it is actually pursuing or aspiring to actually gain the developed country status. Okay, so as India actually aims to achieve this particular developed country status by 2047, that marks 100 years of its independence. At the same time, it is important for us to realize that it is actually, it faces a number of challenges as well as opportunities on the other side. Okay, so this particular article is actually exploring what it actually means to become a developed country and what is the current status of India, where it stands, what are the areas of improvement that India has actually gone through over the recent past, what are the challenges that actually faces India, as well as what are the strategies India actually has to adopt as well as adapt in order to move forward. Okay, so in this particular article, we'll be discussing about India to be a developed country by 2047, how and why, and this actually becomes an integral part of economic growth and development, and this entire topic falls under GS Paper 3, Indian Economy, and issues related to planning, mobilization of resources, growth, development and employment for the mains examination. So moving forward, let us actually see the kind of questions that UPSC has asked in the mains examination. One was actually about the nature of economic growth in India in recent times, that was in 2015. And in 2021, there was actually a question on the V-shaped recovery, and similarly the K-shaped recovery, any kind of, the economic parameter, and what does, like for example, if it is inflation, what impact that does it actually has on the economy, or any kind of repo rate change or the US Fed rate cutting, what impact does it actually have on the Indian economy. All these are actually interrelated nationally as well as globally. Okay, so it is important for us to understand everything in depth so that we can actually apply that while writing the answer for your mains examination. So moving forward, let us understand what this particular article is actually talking about. Okay, so As India aims to achieve the developed country status by the year 2047, that actually marks 100 years since independence, while India achieved, its independence in the year 1947, as all of us know. It faces significant challenges as well as opportunities. And also, here this particular article is actually exploring on how elite is actually to get a developed country status, what is the current status of India, where it actually stands, what are the areas of improvements that India should actually work on, as well as the strategies that actually have to be adopted in order to move forward. So here, defining a developed country and India's current status. So here, international financial organizations that actually classifies countries with a per capita income of around $13,845 and above as developed countries. So what do you mean by this per capita income? Per capita income is nothing but it is a measure of the average income. It is the average income earned per person in a specific area in a given year. So this is the per capita income. So all those countries which actually have a per capita income of around 13,845 and above are termed as developed nations, and this threshold is actually expected to be met, or this is actually going to rise further by 2047. However, if you see the current status of India, it actually stands only at $2,500 according to the International Monetary Fund data as late as April 2024. This highlights that there is a substantial gap in order to reach, a developed country status from the current status that India has. So, in order to achieve this, India needs an average annual real GDP growth rate of 6 to 7% by the year 2047. So, what do you mean by this real GDP growth rate? Real GDP growth rate is nothing but it is the growth in the GDP, that is the gross domestic product, which is actually adjusted for inflation or deflation. Okay. So moving forward, let us understand what are the areas and strategies in order to focus, on to help India become a developed country that has been discussed by the article. So first one is the article says there has to be economic growth as well as investment. Okay. So here, in order to achieve a 7% annual growth rate, India needs a gross fixed capital formation, that is the GFCF, gross fixed capital formation rate of 35% of GDP is actually required. So what is this GFCF is that? It is the net investment. It is the net investment in an economy's physical assets, such as it can either be buildings, it can be machinery, it can be infrastructure, etc. in a particular period. So, in order to achieve a 7% annual growth rate, India needs a GFCF rate of 35% of the GDP. And the current is actually around 35%, which is driven largely by increased government capital expenditure. And also, this growth in this government capex, okay, that is a capital expenditure, cannot be sustained because it is accompanied by a simultaneous high fiscal deficit. What do you mean by fiscal deficit over here? This is nothing but when the expenditure of the government is more than the revenue that is generated by the government in a given fiscal year. That is called as a high fiscal deficit of the center, which was in the range of 6.7%, 6.4% and 5.9% in the 3 post-COVID years. Okay. Next is, however, sustaining this growth requires a 1 to 2 percentage point increase in the private investment in both the corporate as well as the non-corporate. This actually necessitates an environment conducive for private investment. That is, entirely they are saying in order to, for India to actually achieve a developed country status, we need to have sufficient economic growth as well as a good avenue or conducive environment for private investment. The next one they are actually talking about is industrial policy as well as exports. Okay. So, learning from the export-led growth strategies, okay, where the GDP or the national income is actually generated more by, the export-oriented countries, for example, the Southeast Asian regions, as well as specifically China, significant increase in the global export share it has actually seen. India needs to focus on exports as a test of its efficiency. If you see, after, the World War II period, many of the East Asian countries had actually adopted an export-led growth strategy and had actually made a significant rapid progress. Subsequently, if you see, China had also adopted a similar strategy, and China's share in the world's exports in the 1970s period was only a meager 0.6%, whereas if you see, by 2022, it actually had a lion's share of around 11.9%. In contrast, if you see, India's share in the year 1970 or around 1970 was actually 0.6%, and it has only increased to about 2.5% by 2022. The next area is, despite changing the global trade dynamics and raising, the protectionism, exports remain a very, very crucial driver of growth for India as well as any other economy that is actually aspiring to become a developed or the first world economy. And in these difficult times, there is actually a need for multidimensional approach. That is, you need to emphasize on the exports, you need to emphasize on, services as well, manufacturing, as well as your primary sectors like the agriculture, while identifying as well as prioritizing the sunrise industries as well. What are sunrise industries? These industries are actually of, relatively they are new in origin. However, these are, looked upon as those that will gain equal importance or relevance in the near future. So these actually include the food processing, the labor intensive sectors, then, the supports agriculture as well as export demand. Next is efficient import substitution, particularly for critical imports like semiconductors, is also very, very important, ensuring cost effectiveness as well as competitiveness. The next one is adoption of technology, or in other words, you can say technological integration as well as job creation. Okay, so we need to actually embrace the technological advancements like, recently you can see artificial intelligence in every other sector, starting from education, healthcare, governance, etc. And machine learning, this is actually crucial for transforming the industries, for modernizing the industries, when compared to that of the conventional, the traditional methods that have been followed so far. And also, you need to focus that it has to be a balanced approach with respect to that of job creation. It should not actually result in unemployment, but it actually has to help or enhance the job creation. And this article highlights the decreasing elasticity of employment. So what do you mean by employment elasticity? This is nothing but it is the ability of an economy to generate employment opportunities for its population as percent of its growth or its developmental process. So this is nothing but an employment elasticity of 1 actually implies that with every 1 percentage point growth in GDP, employment must also increase by 1%. So this is what is the elasticity of employment. So the article highlights the decreasing elasticity of employment with respect to the output due to technological changes leading to concerns about jobless growth, and now we have actually moved from the mechanical muscles to mechanical minds, and we need to observe this new technology, absorb it, which will require further skill development. So, giving skills is very, very important. At the same time, we need to develop a mix of sectors that will ensure jobs increase along with that of the growth in the economy. The next one is equity as well as inclusive growth. Here, it is very, very important to understand the difference between equality and equity. Okay, so if here you consider this is A, B and C, that is the richest person, the richer person and the poor person. Equality is nothing but giving the same amount of opportunities or accessibility to all the three. So this is equality. Whereas if you come to equity, you actually have the richest person, the richer person and the poor person, where you actually give more accessibility and importance for development to the person who is actually poor, and next to the richer person and then to the richest person. So this is called as equity. So here what the article discusses about it is Here, reducing poverty and inequality is very, very essential, and the benefits of growth must actually be distributed equitably, not equally, but equitably. This is very important. And according to the World Poverty Clock, here you can see extreme poverty in India measured by a poverty line of around $2.15, that is 27 ppb, okay, according to that, has fallen below the threshold of 3%. In fact, you can see the latest update, it has fallen to 2% of the population, implying that extreme poverty in India has been eliminated. The next one is the Consumption Expenditure Survey that was recently released, that is 2022-2023, also indicates a marginal reduction in the Gini coefficient, reflecting the decreasing inequality. So what do you mean by Gini coefficient? This is actually used to measure the income inequality. So it is measured in terms of 0 as well as 1. So here if I actually go on to explain this actually can be expressed or explained in terms of Lorentz curve, where it talks about absolute inequality and absolute equality. So all these terms are very, very important for your economy point of view, okay? The next one, again under equity and inclusive growth, finally the article emphasizes the importance of social safety nets, such as you need to give them subsidized food grains, robust public expenditure on health as well as education in order to promote equity. And also it argues that growth and equity cannot be sequenced, as growth cannot be sustained without equity and equity cannot be achieved without growth. So these kind of lines are very, very important, as you can actually quote them in your mains examination. The next article that we'll be discussing about crime, punishment and child. Okay, so this is in the light of the recent Pune Porsche car accident that has actually taken place. And here the article and the author actually discusses about the systemic failures and the inadequacies that India's criminal justice system actually face with respect to treating the juveniles, that is children who are in conflict with the law. So in this particular article, we'll be discussing about the juvenile justice as well as India's criminal justice system, and we can actually map this particular topic to GS paper 2 of the mains examination, which actually comes under welfare schemes for the vulnerable sections of the population by the center and the states, as well as the performance of these schemes. So moving forward, there has been a mains question that has been asked in the year 2016 that has examined the main provisions of the National Child Policy and throw light on the status of its implementation. So these kind of policies, which are especially targeted towards the vulnerable section of the population, be it women, children, the elderly, etc., are very, very important specifically for your mains examination, and the schemes associated with them are important for the prelims. So now let us understand what this particular article is discussing about. It talks about the systemic flaws and the inadequacies in India's criminal justice system when it especially comes to the treatment of juveniles, that is children in conflict with the law, in light of the recent case of the Pune Porsche car accident. Okay, so now let us actually look at the constitutional and the legal framework for the juvenile justice in India. The first constitutional provision is Article 15. Okay, so this actually talks about a right to equal opportunity. That is, here the state can make laws especially in favor of women and children. Okay, and the next one is Article 21A, and this actually has been inserted by the 86th Constitutional Amendment Act that actually made right to education as a fundamental right for children who are aged between 6 to 14. Next one is Article 23. This actually prohibits human trafficking. Whereas moving on, Article 24 prohibits employment of children under 14 in factories and other industries. Next one, Article 39E, it is actually a directive principle of state policy that actually, states that state has to ensure that children are not abused by unsuitable jobs due to the economic necessity. And finally, Article 39F, this actually provides that the state to ensure children have opportunities for healthy development and are protected from exploitation and any kind of abandonment. Now moving forward, let us look at few of the legal frameworks that actually protect the vulnerabilities that are faced by the children or the juveniles. Okay, the first one is Juvenile Justice Care and Protection of Children Act 2015, where the objective of this particular act is care, protection, development, treatment and rehabilitation of children in conflict with the law and those children who are in need of care as well as protection. Okay. And then this actually, necessitates for the establishment of juvenile justice boards to handle the cases involving children in conflict with the law and also to conduct inspections to ensure no juveniles are detained in the adult prisons. So there is also child welfare committees which actually addresses the needs of children in need of care and protection, followed by observation homes as well as special homes where there are temporary stay during the inquiry and rehabilitation post the conviction. So this provision actually prohibits detention of the juveniles in the adult prisons and mandates placement in the observation homes. The next one is certain provisions of the Indian Penal Code as well as the Code of Criminal Procedure, that is the CRPC, where the differentiation in sentencing and procedures for the child offenders are actually being mentioned there, and also these provisions actually ensures protection to the juveniles. Okay. So now let us actually understand what are the systemic flaws in the treatment of the juveniles in India's criminal justice system. First one, juveniles are actually sent to the adult prisons, which are a very, very sad state of affairs. So you can say the 2015 Juvenile Justice Act mandates that the children who are in conflict with the law be placed in the observation homes and not in regular adult prisons. Despite this, if you actually see the data between 2016 and 2021, almost 10,000 children were transferred from the adult prisons to the childcare institutions, and this actually exposes them to abuse, a lot of violence as well as detrimental psychological impacts, and this actually highlights a failure in enforcing the protective laws, and it's also against the legal framework and the constitutional provisions. So juvenile justice boards are actually required to inspect the prisons very regularly in order to ensure no juveniles are detained in the elderly or you can say in the adult prisons, yet inspections and compliance are often lacking. The next one is there is a misrepresentation of age by the police. Okay. So the police officers often misrepresent the age of the accused juveniles, treating them as adults despite their actual age. This actually results in minors being denied age-appropriate legal protections and being detained in the adult facilities, which is a practice that is both unlawful as well as harmful. Moving forward, there is also lack of immediate legal representation or immediate legal aid. Here, juveniles often face arrest as well as interrogation without immediate access to legal representation despite constitutional guarantees, and there are no clear mandates to ensure a lawyer is present during these critical stages, leaving minors who are actually vulnerable to a lot of abuse, violence, coercion as well as unlawful practices. So moving forward, there are also issues of procedural gaps in assigning the legal aid. So although the police must inform the district legal services authority upon apprehending a child, there are no clear protocols for what happens until, that is the period when the, before the child is actually detained till his conviction. There is no clear procedure of what protocols should actually be followed until a lawyer is actually assigned. And this gap can lead to the violation of rights and such as unlawful detentions and coercive interrogations, very, very violent means of interrogating. This actually highlights the need for defined procedures. Moving forward, there is also another systemic flaw of reactive rather than preventive approach. The system relies on correcting the errors after they occur rather than preventing them, which is inherently flawed. That is, prevention is better than cure, but the system actually operates in directly opposite direction. This reactive approach fails to protect the juveniles effectively, as seen in the delayed inspections and corrective measures only taken after wrongful detentions in adult prisons, emphasizing the need for a preventive approach. Next one, to actually conclude the topic in a balanced approach, in order to address the systemic flaws in India's juvenile justice system, immediate steps must be taken in order to enforce the Juvenile Justice Act as well as the provisions, improve the age verification, ensure the immediate legal representation, define clear legal aid procedures, and also to shift to a preventive approach. Okay. Next, implementing these measures, such as the one stated above, will safeguard the juvenile's right It will prevent the unlawful detentions and also promote rehabilitation. Thereby, it finally ensures a fair and protective justice system for the minors. The next article that we'll be discussing about is heat-baked Chennai can set an example for that of India. So, however, this particular article, though it discusses about the situations in Chennai of how the temperatures have actually been increased specifically due to its rapid urbanization, here what is important for the examination is the concept of the phenomena of urban heat islands, okay, because we already have this question been asked in the examination once in the mains. So, moving ahead, we'll be discussing about the urban heat islands as it is a part of climate change and pollution, and we can map this particular topic to the environment under prelims examination and also for the mains examination under GS paper 3, environment and ecology, pollution as well as conservation. So moving forward, as I told you, in the year 2013, UPSC had actually asked a question on the causes for the formation of the urban heat islands and how does it affect the weather and the habitants of the place. So here, this particular topic becomes important for both the prelims as well as the mains examination. So moving forward, now let us understand what this particular article is discussing about. So the article is actually discussing about the escalating urban heat island effect in Chennai that is further exacerbated by the global warming as well as the local factors like increasing population as well as the rapid urbanization. So here, the takeaway from this particular topic is that let us understand what is this particular phenomena of the urban heat island. And moreover, this article discusses about how this UHI, that is urban heat island, causes the city temperatures to actually significantly rise and how it is actually higher, particularly in the urban areas when compared to that of the rural areas. And also it discusses about various measures and the recommendations in order to mitigate this effect, such as increasing the green cover, improving the energy efficiency in the air conditioning services, as well as enhancing the city planning as well as infrastructure. Okay. So moving forward, let us understand what this urban heat island is all about. Okay. So an urban heat island is nothing but it is a local and a very temporary phenomenon experienced by certain pockets or particular pockets within a city which actually experience higher temperature when compared to that of the neighboring or the surrounding areas on the particular or on the same day. So these variations are mainly due to the heat which actually remains trapped within the system or this location that offer or they actually resemble the concrete jungles. Okay, concrete jungles are nothing but the rapidly urbanized areas with big skyscrapers, etc. And the temperature variation that usually it is present is it can range between 3 to 5 degrees Celsius. So here you can actually see the picture of how this entire after the solar insolation, how this heating or the urban heat island effect actually takes place. So if you look at this particular diagram, you can see the sun's insolation over here falling on the building that actually results in heat from the building surface that results in the temperature increase, and also from the heat from the road surface results in the temperature increase, as well as the vehicular emissions also results in temperature increase. Also the use of the air conditioners that actually result in the GHG or the release of chlorofluorocarbons that also results in the increase in the temperature. And also there are heat of vaporization and heat of vaporization from the lakes or the water sources or the vegetation cover. And however, in these areas, it is relatively lesser because the trees and oceans actually act as natural carbon sinks. So moving forward, let us understand this concept of why are the cities hotter when compared to that of the rural areas. The first one is reduced green cover, as we also, already saw that urban areas, they have less green cover compared to that of the rural areas. Okay. So if you see the rural landscapes, they are abundant with that of plantations. They have farmlands, they have forests, trees, etc., which actually usually enhance the process of transpiration. Okay. So transpiration is nothing but this involves plants that actually absorb water through their roots and they release water vapor through their leaves, which actually helps in order to lower the ambient temperature. That is, in simple words, it helps to lessen the temperature. In contrast, if you see, the cities often lack sufficient green spaces, reducing its natural cooling effect. The second one, why are cities hotter, is that it is the surface materials that are used. Because if you see, the urban environments are often characterized by heavily constructed, buildings which actually involves materials like concrete, cement, bricks, glass, etc., which actually has a high thermal mass. What do you mean by thermal mass? This is nothing but the capacity of these particular materials in order to, when they observe and retain more heat, that is called as higher thermal mass. Okay, so this is actually found in the urban areas as in contrast with that of the rural areas. So moving forward, this actually results in higher temperatures in the urban settings, especially during and after the periods of sunlight exposure. The third reason is that the construction density is very, very high in the in the urban areas when compared to that of the rural areas. So the high density of buildings and infrastructure, this actually limits the circulation of the air and creates the effect which is called as the canyon effect, where the heat is actually trapped in between the high-rise structures. For example, if these are the buildings, you have the heat which is trapped between these structures. So this is actually called as the canyon effect. Okay, so this particular lack of airflow, this inhibits cooling and keeps the urban areas warmer compared to that of the rural areas, which are actually more ventilated with more greenery and farmlands. Next one is the anthropogenic heat, which is actually from vehicles, industrial processes, and extensive or widespread use of air conditioners, release of GHG, etc. And rural areas, on the other hand, with lower population density, they have comparatively lower industrial activities. They generate less anthropogenic heat. So moving forward, if you actually look at this particular diagram, this is what is called as a canyon effect, where you have the absorption and the retention of heat in between the buildings, which actually inhibits the circulation of air. So here the surface absorbs more heat, and here it is less cooling from evaporation and plant transpiration, and also there is less ground storage of rainfall. So this entire thing actually happens in the urban areas. Whereas if you see in the rural areas, there is greater ground storage of rainfall, there is greater cooling and evaporation from the plant through transpiration, and also the surface actually absorbs less heat because it actually has enough vegetation cover. So moving forward, let us actually understand what the article has actually suggested in reducing or undermining this particular effect of the urban heat. So the first thing is, how does the mitigation strategies actually work is, first one is we need to enhance the green cover. Here you need to enhance or increase the greenery in the cities in order to cool the urban environment or the urban areas via transpiration. Example is this Miyawaki forest in Chennai. These are nothing but these are dense and biodiverse forests which actually has a larger capacity of absorbing the carbon, or which actually acts as natural carbon sinks. Next one is choosing appropriate building materials, where you use materials that reflect the sunlight and heat in order to reduce the ambient temperatures in the surrounding. Example is, we can always use light colored paving materials and reflective paints rather than using dark colors. The next one is promoting roof and terrace gardens, where we insulate the buildings and reduce the need for air conditioning with the green roofs, where you have policies as well as the incentives for rooftop gardens that are actually given for the building owners. The next one is increasing energy efficiency in the cooling system, which is nothing but enhance the efficiency of the air conditioners in order to reduce the heat output as well as the energy consumption. And here you need to encourage the adoption of energy efficient systems. The next one is there has to be smart urban planning, where optimize the urban layouts in order to enhance sufficient airflow as well as ventilation in order to reduce the accumulation of heat. The next one is promoting sustained public transport and reduced, use of vehicle. Here, reduce the vehicle heat generation by promoting public transport and reducing the use of private vehicles. Okay. Here, expand the options like electric buses and encourage the cycling as well as walking. Okay, which actually is good for health as well as for the environment. Next one is developing local climate action plans, such as the one like Chennai's climate action plan. This actually aims at acutely reducing the urban heat island effect via integrated urban planning and green initiatives. The next article that we'll be discussing about is US-China defense chiefs lock horns on Taiwan at Asia Security Summit. So this particular topic is in news. This is because Singapore is actually currently hosting the 21st Shangri-La Dialogue, and here we'll be discussing about what this particular Shangri-La Dialogue is all about, from where it has actually sourced its name, the key facts about it, as well as the significance. Okay, so here we'll be discussing about what this Shangri-La Dialogue is all about, and this particular news actually talks about the US-China relations, or the tug of war that is happening between the two sides, and we can map this particular topic to GS paper 2 prelims as well as under mains. It actually comes under important international institutions. So moving forward, there has been a previous question that has been, previous year question that has been asked in the year 2020 in the prelims examination with respect to the international agreement or the setup and the subject of discussion or the dimension that had actually been covered over there. For example, the Alma-Ata Declaration, the Hague Convention, the Talanoa Dialogue, as well as the Under 2 Coalition are all important. So from here, the takeaway is that all international, agreements or any kind of organizations that are actually formed, the agenda of it, the mission, the vision, as well as whether India is a founding member of it or not, all becomes important specifically for your prelims examination. So moving forward, let us now understand what this particular article is talking about. Okay, so the US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin as well as China's Defense Minister Dong Zhang, they actually met at Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore recently, and now it is important for us to understand what is this Shangri-La Dialogue all about. Okay, so it is nothing but an international government security conference that is actually held annually, that is every year in Singapore, by London-based independent think tank, that is the International Institute for Strategic Studies, that is IISS. Okay, so moving forward, this has been named, that is it got its name Shangri-La from a hotel in Singapore, that is nothing but the Shangri-La Hotel, and it was launched in the year 2002, and it is Asia's premier defense summit. Okay, so the composition of it is always attended by the defense ministers, the legislators, the ministerial heads, as well as the military chiefs of around 28 countries of the Asia Pacific region. So this is very, very important. And besides the government representatives, the forum is also accompanied by the civil society stakeholders. So this is an important takeaway, such as the non-governmental organizations, the academicians, the media representatives, the business delegates, etc. And for this particular reason, though it is primarily a track 1 diplomacy, it has also the elements of track 2 diplomacy which is built in it. So here it is important to understand what is this track 1 as well as track 2 diplomacy. Okay, so track 1 diplomacy is nothing but it's more of official, it is the governmental diplomacy that occurs inside the official government channels, whereas if you see track 2 diplomacy, it is the practice of the non-governmental, informal as well as the unofficial contacts and the activities between the private citizens. Okay, so apart from the government individuals, you have the private individuals as well as the citizens or group of individuals. Sometimes they are also referred to as the non-state actors. Next is track 2 diplomacy thereby complements rather than replaces the track 1 diplomacy by aiding the official actors in conflict resolution in the form of informal exploration of the perspectives that are collected, or the general public perspectives and the potential solutions from the normal negotiation or power play. The next article that we'll be discussing about is railways to construct canopy bridges across the tracks in Assam Gibbon habitat. So this particular article is discussing about how the Indian Railways has been planning in order to set up the canopy bridges over the railway tracks in the Gibbon Wildlife Sanctuary, which is situated in the Jorhat district of Assam in India, in order to facilitate the safe as well as the free movement of these particular species. So here what is important for the prelims perspective is this particular species of Huluk gibbons. Okay, so here we'll be discussing about the conservation of Huluk gibbons, and also the construction of these canopy bridges are a part of infrastructure, and here we can map this particular topic to prelims as well as mains under GS paper 3 environment and ecology, conservation as well as infrastructure under economy as well. So moving forward, let us actually understand how the previous year question has been. Questions have been across or revolving around the environment and ecology topics. Here, whatever wildlife sanctuary or the biosphere reserves or national parks or any kind of species that are actually in news, lately, and any kind of natural vegetation which is actually found in any area, which region it actually is present in, which region it passes through, and what all rivers it actually traverses. These are the kind of questions that UPSC has been asking specifically in the prelims examination. Okay, so here also there was a question in the year 2015 in the prelims examination with respect to that of roots of living trees. Okay, that is, they gave an explanation and asked us to point out in which of the state it is actually present in. So this is actually an important topic of discussion, as you can understand. Now let us understand what this particular news is talking about. Here, the Northeast Frontier Railway has allocated funds in order to construct the canopy bridges, okay, in Assam. So here they can ask, canopy bridges are actually in news, and this was an initiative in which of the following states. So here the purpose of constructing these particular canopy bridges across the railway, tracks or the rails, it is just to facilitate free as well as safer movement of India's only ape, that is nothing but the Hoolock gibbon, across a railway track that splits its prime habitat in the area of eastern Assam. Now, let us actually understand what is that track. It is a 1.6 5-kilometer track that actually divides around 2098.62 hectare of Kholangapar Gibbon Sanctuary in the Jorhat district of Assam state in India, and the sanctuary actually hosts the largest concentration of the Hoolock gibbon, which is one of the 20 ape species which are actually found worldwide. Now moving forward, it is important for us to understand this particular species of Hoolock gibbon, that is its distribution, the threat as well as the conservation status in the IUCN. So first is that we need to understand it is the only ape which is actually found in India. Its habitat actually include forests of Bangladesh, Northeast India, Myanmar as well as Southwest China, and also it is spread across tropical as well as a subtropical forests where they actually prefer the dense as well as primarily the evergreen forest. So here it is categorized into two. First is the western Hoolock gibbon as well as the eastern Hoolock gibbon. Okay, so if you see the western species, it is found in the northeast India, south of Brahmaputra as well as east of river Dibang, and also it is found in eastern Bangladesh as well as in the region of northwest Myanmar, and it is listed as endangered in the IUCN Red List. But the eastern Hoolock gibbon, it is actually listed as vulnerable in the IUCN Red List, and it is actually found in the northeastern states of Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, southern China, northeastern Myanmar, etc. If you actually see what kind of threats it's actually facing is that first is deforestation, the fragmentation of its habitat, hunting as well as illegal pet trade. So moving forward, let us actually understand certain conservation efforts, okay? That is the global conservation efforts, that is the global gibbon network. So here various stakeholders, across the world actually came together in order to establish the global gibbon network initiative. It was actually the IUCN SSC Primate Specialist Group Selection on Small Apes as well as the international collaboration to conserve the gibbons, and the Siamang have joined the forces with the Hainan Institute of National Parks and Eco Foundation Global in order to establish this global gibbon network, which is nothing but it is an international coalition of organization. It has researchers as well as the conservation experts and the environmentalists who come together, and they have actually dedicated this to the protection as well as conservation of Hoolock gibbon species across the world, the small apes that are actually found mainly across Southeast Asia. Now let us solve few prelims as well as a mains practice question. Moving forward, the first question is, consider the following statement. Track 2 diplomacy is official government diplomacy. No, this is wrong. Track 1 is the practice of non-governmental, informal, unofficial contacts. This is also wrong because this is actually swapped over here. So which of the statements given above is or are correct? Neither 1 nor 2. That is, both the statements are actually swapped and they are wrong. So the answer will be option D, neither 1 nor 2. Moving on, the second question is actually about the Global Gibbon Network. The Global Gibbon Network is an international coalition which is dedicated to the protection and conservation of gibbons, which are primarily found in Southeast Asia. This is correct. The IUCN SSC Primate, Specialist Group section on small apes is a part of Global Gibbon Network initiative. This is also correct. And the Hainan Institute of National Parks and Eco Foundation are collaborating in order to establish the Global Gibbon Network initiative. This is also correct. The GGN focuses exclusively on the conservation of Huluk gibbon. This is actually wrong. So going by these particular statements, since statement 1, 2 and 3 are correct, the answer will be option B. So moving forward, which of the following statements regarding Huluk gibbon is correct? The Holong Upper Gibbon Sanctuary is the only habitat for Huluk gibbon in India. This is actually wrong. The Huluk gibbon is one of the 20 ape species worldwide and it is listed as endangered on the IUCN list. This is actually correct since only statement 2 is correct. The answer will be option B. The fourth question actually reads, which one of the following statements is an appropriate description of employment elasticity? It is nothing but it is the relationship between the changes in the employment and the changes in the economic output. So since the answer is direct and since option B is correct, the answer is option B. So the fifth question reads, which one of the following is not responsible for the origin of urban heat island? Atmospheric pollution, yes, correct. City buildings, yes, it is correct. Central heating systems of cities, this is also correct. High wind speed, this is actually wrong. Since A is the wrong option, the answer will be option A. So moving forward, let's actually solve the mains practice question. The question reads, highlight the various systemic flaws and the inadequacies in India's criminal justice system when it comes to the treatment of juveniles and suggest the measures to reform it. So here the approach to this particular question has been broken into introduction, body as well as the conclusion. In the introduction, we will actually briefly define the scope of the juvenile justice in India and also we will mention the constitutional provisions which is actually aimed at child protection. And towards the body, we'll be discussing on how minors are often detained in adult prisons which are contrary to the legal provisions, as well as outline the misinterpretation of the age or misrepresentation of the age by the police and explain the lack of immediate legal representation. Also, we need to discuss on emphasizing the procedural gaps in legal aid and the current reactive approach of the system. The next one, in the conclusion, we will conclude the answer by emphasizing the need for immediate reforms in the legislative enforcement, legal representation and procedural safeguards in order to uphold the rights as well as the welfare of the juveniles. With this, we've actually come to the end of the discussion of the Daily News Analysis. For regular updates, please do like, share and subscribe to Narayana IAS Academy YouTube channel. Thank you.